Hi everybody, this is a video for the last unit of our whole semester and our whole year, and that is going to be talking about all the different kinds of living things that are out there, and we call that biodiversity, the diversity of life. And we've started already, and today's going to be mainly a guide through my Moodle site. So I'm not going to be doing a whole lot of, there's going to be no PowerPoint slides this time. I'm just going to show you some of the sites where you can get some of the main points of the information so that we can do some neater activities in class. So let me get onto the internet here, and I'll start by showing you the Moodle site as you guys have seen all year long here. And down at the bottom is our last unit. We talked about classifying, putting things into different groups, and we talked about Linnaeus, and we talked about the 7 groups, kingdom, phylum, class, all the way down to species. And we've even gotten a little tiny bit into the different kingdoms, but today we're going to talk about them a little bit more in detail. I think to start out with, we should probably, kind of remind ourselves what was in the last video that was on microorganisms, and just remember that there are 3 different domains, and 2 of the domains are bacteria domains, and they are prokaryotic. So one of them is called archaebacteria, and one of them is called eubacteria, and that is on one of the information sheets that I've given you. And then there's a 3rd domain that's called the eukaryote domain. So the prokaryotes include bacteria and archaebacteria, eubacteria and archaebacteria, and the eukaryotic domain, the ones that have a nucleus inside of their cells, are actually, there's 4 kingdoms in that domain. And one of them are called protists, and we've talked about those a little bit. And then there's plants, fungi, and animals. And so we're going to be talking about the plants, the fungi, and the animals today. And most of the links I'm going to be showing you today are from this great site, biologyforkids.com. Perfect vocabulary amount and stuff like that. Nothing really hard for you to understand. And this is actually one of the pages here on the microorganisms. So you might want to go back to that concept map, and or whatever sheet that I've given out for that. And this is the plants one. But you might remember that we had done this one way back at the front that's upside down on the domains. So I have included the bacteria and stuff on there too. Let's go back to the plants here. So let's talk quickly about plants. I think you all know this already, but plants are all autotrophic. They make their own food. They do the process of photosynthesis. And there are 2 main groups, and they're called non-vascular and vascular. Let me show you the website for that. Again, Biology for Kids. It's the link on Moodle. And when you go to the plants, there's all sorts of stuff over here for you to look at. So what we just talked about plants doing photosynthesis, and that discussion's here. We've kind of already had a unit on that. And then I guess that the first thing you should know is that there are one kind of plant that are called non-vascular, no vascular plants. And what that means is that they do not usually have any roots, any stems, any leaves, so therefore they cannot grow very large or very tall. And I'm going to have some sample of moss for you to see in class so you can see an example of that. So they do photosynthesis, but they're very small. They tend to need to be in very moist areas because they don't have any roots, and they don't have any stems, and they don't have any leaves. So that kind of covers this up. But they also are missing 2 little things that I like to think of as elevators that are called xylem and phloem. Xylem and phloem are like elevators that carry water up and food down. Xylem carries water up, and phloem carries the sugars in photosynthesis down from the leaves, down to the rest of the plant. And the other group are called vascular, so it kind of makes sense. Non means not, so non-vascular, vascular. So xylem and phloem. And it says, and the last thing about non-vasculars is that they do not reproduce by planting seeds. They use a structure called a spore. So when you're kind of naming the thing that grows into a new plant, you don't call it a seed, you call it a spore. Very similar to what you call it with fungi, which I'm going to do next. The vascular group are the group of plants that you're probably more used to seeing. These are the plants that contain xylem and phloem, and again, these are all linked on that website. Xylem and phloem are again like elevators that carry the water up from the ground and the food down from the leaves. So that's their main thing. They also then, of course, because they have elevators, they have roots and stems and leaves because they can carry them, can be very tall, and they can carry things from the ground all the way up to high mountains. It's kind of like a building that has a lot of stories and then has an elevator so you can get from one place to another. And then I'll show you a few examples of some of the different vascular plants. I don't have any of these, but one of the nice ones that you can hang up in your house are called ferns, and they're vascular. The main kinds that we're going to talk about are broken up into two groups. One group are called the gymnosperm group. Now these have seeds in them, but the gymnosperm group are the ones that you guys are probably used to seeing that have maybe thin needle-like leaves. They have cones where their seeds are found, but they do not have flowers. And some examples are pine trees and these things called cycads here. Pine trees and spruce trees are called conifers. And then there's a kind called ginkgo. That's a really neat one too, where you can squeeze it and you get some like a liquid out that actually is used in lotions. It's a softening liquid. You can get that right out of the leaf. So going back to kind of the map, vascular plants, I've given you the one group called the gymnosperms, and the examples are conifers, cycads, and ginkgos, and conifers are the ones that have the seeds found in cones. The other group are called angiosperms, and they're the ones that produce seeds inside of a flower, and the flower grows into a fruit. And I'll show you an example of those. Those are the ones that you see insects on all the time, and those flowers are meant to draw the insects over there so that they will get the pollen from one flower to another flower, and so that's why they're so pretty and smell really good. So that's a way that two organisms kind of help each other out. Kind of a mutualistic thing. We're not going to get into the types of angiosperms, but I will have some flowers for you to look at so you can see the different parts of a flower and how insects might pollinate them. The other group that I wanted to quickly talk about for you all was the fungi group. So we're going to be doing some of this stuff in class, and now let me rotate this page, and if you go to this next page in your binder on this particular packet, it's page 23. And take a look there. I'm not going to go through this in a lot of detail. Again, we're talking about multicellular organisms that are eukaryotic now, in the eukaryotic domain. And fungi look like they might be plants because they grow in the ground, like mushrooms do. But they are heterotrophic, which means they break down food. They don't make their own. But like plants, they have a cell wall. And like some of the non-vascular plants I just talked about, like the mosses, they reproduce by using these things called spores. And there's sexual and asexual reproduction, and some of them are very useful as recyclers that we call decomposers. And as you know from just if you eat pizza or some kind of a hamburger or something, sometimes people like mushrooms and certain kinds of fungi as food. And sometimes they can cause a disease like athlete's foot, or sometimes they can fight a disease. For example, penicillin and ampicillin are both fungi that are antibiotics. The three kinds of fungi are club, sac, and zygote fungi, and I'll show you a picture for the examples of those that are underneath. So when you come over here and you go to the Moodle site and you see the fungi, you'll see that the club fungi include the ones with a stalk and a cap. So mushrooms are the best example of that. And we're going to look at those in class too. The second kind are called zygote fungi. These are the kinds that create what we call mold. You guys are probably used to seeing maybe fruit mold or bread mold, and sometimes mold on a carpet. And that's called the zygote fungi. And it looks a little different when you look at it up close. And then there's a third kind that are called sac fungi, where the spores are in these microscopic little sacs. And yeast is the best example of that. And you know about yeast from our discussion of fermentation, but and respiration and things. But yeast is really helpful in making carbonated beverages and alcoholic beverages and cakes and breads. So that kind of gives you an introduction to the groups of animals of organisms that we're going to spend for plants and fungi, and then we're going to look at animals in a little bit more detail. So I hope this worked. We'll take it and check it out. Thanks a lot, everybody.